On this week's episode of Crowdfunding Nerds, we discuss Gamefound's new advertising platform, AdFound. We talk about the burden of work, the reliability of their tracking, and a whole bunch of different things. We really get into the weeds on this one, and it's really a supplement to our discussion last week with Alex Radcliffe, where we continue our digesting of the information he gave us, and we really try to lay everything out that we can. So hope you get a lot out of this one. Let's get into it.
Game begin.
Let's go.
Vegeta, what does the scouter say about his marketing level?
It's over 9,000!
What, 9,000? I must be using Crowdfunding Nerds.
Amazing.
Hey everybody, and welcome to another awesome episode of Crowdfunding Nerds. I am your host, Andrew Lowen, and I am joined as always by Sean. And today we're going to talk about so last week we had a discussion with Alex Radcliffe, the Chief Marketing Officer of Gamefound, to talk about AdFound and some other elements related to Gamefound. I had some questions. I didn't want it to be like an adversarial conversation because we're not adversaries. But I also wanted to, ask real questions. So we got kind of into the weeds, and especially in the second half of the podcast, where I asked questions about specific creators and the performance on Gamefound versus Kickstarter and whatnot. So anyway, the day our podcast comes out, they made official their AdFound program, which they released in a blog post, which is like kind of a performance marketing service. And then, they referenced their earlier blog posts that they made on like early in January 2025 about how Gamefound is the number one board game crowdfunding platform. It's a 2024 summary. And so we really wanted to just kind of reflect on the discussion we had last week about Gamefound becoming an advertiser, and then this program which they detailed called AdFound, which was this data wasn't available when we recorded our podcast. It went live actually the same day that our podcast went live, which was just a couple of days later. And so I don't know, we could jump into the just into the AdFound article, or we could kind of start with initial reflections on on the discussion. Where do you want to begin, Sean?
We should certainly discuss what it is to begin with, so people are on the same page.
Okay.
So essentially, it's really a portal within the back end of Gamefound to submit ads that the Gamefound marketing team would then port over to Meta Ads and Google Ads. So the idea is that you would submit your creatives and your marketing messaging, and then they would then take those, and whether it's done automatically through some API or whether they are manually doing it, they will then create your ads within their ad account, and then using all their data points from their pixel and their API with Gamefound and their maybe tried and tested marketing audiences, they will then promote your game. And it runs off a 5% fee from conversions. So that's how
they can figure out that they earned you from the ads. They will charge you 5% of whatever the pledge value was.
So it looks quite attractive, right? Because when you compare it to something like BackerKit, which is 15% per conversion,
yes.
And BackerKit also locks you into certain of their systems, so you can't access certain of their services unless you agree to use them for certain things. Well, I don't see a system that's really locking you into their platforms, but it sort of does lock you into their email system, right? If you're doing pre-marketing, I don't think they allow you to change the URL, so you're probably directing people towards your
become Gamefound followers.
Right. I think that's what's happening. As far as I believe it, I'm not sure if you're able to direct it to any landing page or you're choosing. And I think that's probably maybe one of the my first kind of red flag is that I don't think Gamefound is particularly good at pre-marketing, simply, or even just community building, because their email systems are lackluster. They are not sufficient for really segmenting and automating your email communications, which is really key to building your community long term. I think it's great for people who are starting out and they just need a way to contact their people and have basic functionality like polls and kind of interface with them. So it's great for that. And then the other advantage that you have to pay. So like something like MailChimp or MailerLite, if you cross the threshold of 1,000 subscribers, you have to start paying. Whilst with this, there is a fee once you have these people in the system. But the disadvantage is that if you are kind of doing everything through Gamefound and this particular area, you are going to be losing a lot of functionality that's really key and crucial to your success by not using a focused, dedicated email provider. And we talked about this with Alex last week, right? The danger of trying to do everything is that you're not going to be able to compete with a MailerLite, because MailerLite, that's all they do, and it's very specialized, it's very focused, it's got a lot of functionality that you can't really compete with if you're going for like an all-in system that's trying to do everything.
Yeah, so this is my conclusion from, this is like from a bird's eye view, the end from the beginning. This is my conclusion. AdFound is good for somebody that wants to just have like an all-in-one solution because they don't want to think about it. They just want to, you have to do marketing at this point. You can't just not do marketing. But AdFound, it seems like it's best for somebody that, they'd rather have it than nothing. They don't really have time or willingness to do like email marketing. They're not really willing to like go the extra mile and do the things that we think you really need to do if you want to be successful, especially as like a first time creator. And they but they just want marketing. I think that is a surprisingly high number of, higher than you might think, number of creators, mainly first-time creators that don't know what they're in for. Like if you're a first-time creator and you're like, hey, yeah, I know I need to do marketing, but I'm scared of it, and I just I don't have very much time that I want to dedicate to managing it. This might be a decent option for you. The one thing that is for sure, so that in their blog, they talk about AdFound. They say that it will bring you the highest quality performance marketing. Performance marketing is a very key word we can get into in a second, for 2 to 3 times cheaper than the nearest competition. Now, I consider our company competition with AdFound, but we are not performance marketing. We're not a performance marketing based company, which again, I'll define in a second. But I think they're talking about BackerKit and GelUp. Those are the two major companies that do performance marketing, where and I'll define it now, is in essence what you do is you pay after they generate you a lead. So that sounds really great on the surface, because let's just say I spend $100 in ads, and then they generate me $300 in sales. So 5% of the $300 generated in sales is $15. So to be clear, I would, because I made $300, you didn't have to pay $15. You had to pay $115. So, I don't know, let's just, we're about at a ratio of $3 earned for each dollar that you spend. It's a little lower than that, but you guys get the point. So the idea behind performance marketing is you're only going to pay the money that so you're going to pay every penny of the ad spend. So when you spend money on Facebook to generate ads, or when Gamefound does this on your behalf, you're going to have to pay back every penny of that, and they'll track that. And it's very easy to find and share, like how much money did we spend. You can even probably tell them what budget to use, or what daily budget, or what total budget to use, and that kind of thing. So that number is known generally, but then the amount that they generate for you in sales is unknown. So during, if ads bring a particular follower, then I would imagine that Gamefound has the ability to track what that follower does. But for the most part, the article focuses on what happens when, when your campaign is live. They'll do performance marketing. So the thing that I found that I don't like about performance marketing is that you can spend $1,000 and get one sale, and you'll have to, I don't know, whatever it is, $100, let's say. So you have to pay Gamefound $1,005 to make your $100 sale. And so the emphasis, and that's an exaggeration, but of what would likely happen if you spend $1,000, I hope you would make more than one sale. But um, the reality is that performance marketing is so much based upon the amount of money that you spend. And so the incentive for a company that it's based in performance marketing is to get you to spend more money. Because if they get you to spend more money, then you're going to make more sales. Now, if your sales are not profitable, like me, I used performance marketing in the past and I earned varying numbers, but eventually the end number was 1.7 to dollars earned for every dollar spent, not including their fee. It gets to be a really bad return. And the problem that I see is like people just don't understand what a poor return this can be. And and then once you're in to the performance marketing thing, it's really hard to turn over to a company like us, when you're kind of stuck there, because it's just you're in too deep. So what do? Turn off your ads during your live campaign. So I have a number of problems just inherently with performance marketing as a which is why we even jumped into this industry to begin with, because everybody focuses on that performance marketing aspect. It sure seems like it's a good idea until you've spent, for me, I spent like $34,000 or something and earned a 1.7 return on that, which means at the end of the day, I lost more money than I made, because, I had to, $0.7. I had to use, I had to buy my product and everything like that. And, I had to give product. I was selling products. So like, if you're not making 3 to 1 at least, then you are losing money. Or rather, I consider 3 to 1 is like the minimum, kind of like break even point. It's probably closer like 2.5 to $2.7 earned for every dollar spent. That would be your break even point, because you have to think about, you have to manufacture everything. You have to, pay for your freight and pay for Kickstarter fees or Gamefound fees or whatever, and credit card processing fees, VAT fees. And so there are a lot of different things that are going to take money just to operate. And so if your marketing isn't earning 3 to 1 or more, then you're really losing, for every sale you make, you're losing money. And AdFound, just by default, being performance marketing, kind of lends itself to, they want you to spend more money, because if you spend more money, they're incentivized rather to ask you to spend more, because if you spend more, they make more. And your campaign will look better as far as numbers. You'll raise more money overall, but you will actually end up having less in the bank at the end of the day. And this is where a lot of companies they do it wrong, and they go out of business because they can't properly manage the money that they've brought in versus the money they've spent. It's all about the money that you keep at the end
So
of the day.
it's on the service level, it seems like it's easier, but there's actually another thing you have to manage. Then there's more numbers you have to keep track of.
Yeah, it's like a lot of people just want to, especially before a Kickstarter, and I understand. Like, I'm a Kickstarter creator myself. I want to just throw money at it and say, like, how I was just throwing money left, right, and center during the, Deliverance Council of the Fallen pre-launch. I was like, Sean, can we spend an extra $100 every day? Like, let's just do it. Go, do it. And you're probably like, dude, I can't make money spending that extra 100, but I can blow an extra 100 for you. So it really needs somebody to be paying attention to it in order to do well. But the temptation is just to say, okay, I'm just going to let this run. But at the very end, and I've been there, when you're stuck with the bill, you regret your choices. It's like the performance marketing performed for them, but not for me. And at the end of the day, marketing needs to perform for you. So I don't like even the term performance marketing just feels icky. I because you have to pay for the ad spend no matter what. You're the one on the hook for the ad spend. And if they're on the hook for the ad spend, I'll eat my hat. But it's definitely something that kind of masks the reality of what you will have to do as a creator. And so, like, overall, I've found, as far as performance marketing goes, I would say that AdFound is better than BackerKit or Gelop as far as like the current offering. It's just, you obviously can only use it if you're on the Gamefound platform, because it's going to cost less. Like it costs, commission wise, they make less commission per sale than BackerKit, which will charge you typically 15% of whatever sale they make, sometimes 22% of whatever sale they can justify, or 15% of what they think they're making. Gelop does something like that. And so it's overall very sus to me, just in general, because of performance marketing, not because it's a competitor to me, but we've had other performance marketing competitors that they're just kind of the same. So that's like where I'm coming from when I judge the rest. So I'm already in a position where I don't like it. And then like we'll add other things which we can get into, and I tend to become less and less favorable. So if you're expecting to hear like a really positive review of this AdFound thing, you're not going to get one from me. But I just want, anybody listening to this, you should listen so that you can have eyes wide open when you move forward with something like that.
Yeah, and I think as well, these are just first thoughts. We have no experience with this. In fact, if you land up using AdFound and you have a great experience or a not so great experience, we'd love to have you on and use you as a case study to kind of discuss, talk about the pros and cons about it. I think another thing in terms of this ad performance is that, and this kind of is changing gears in terms of the advantages and disadvantages of this particular setup that Gamefound is working with. So you look at one of their competitors, like Gelop, for example, which uses a similar pricing system, is that they will say that their systems have worked out that they've earned a certain amount above that what you've been able to directly track, and then they charge you based on that. This is hard to work out because based on what data, based on what, and then you're kind of reliant on the agency to tell you how much money they made you, and then you just, I suppose, have to trust them. So this is the same problem with Gamefound. Now, they actually mentioned this on this blog post. They say AdFound has a direct connection with Gamefound and Meta platforms, providing the best optimization. This is true. So because of the iOS 14 update, the advantage that someone has who owns the domain, so whoever owns gamefound.com can bring that into Meta and have a connection, a far deeper connection in terms of tracking, know what's happening. But so the advantage is that they would have better tracking than an average person. So if you're trying to run your own ads directly to Gamefound would have better tracking capacities than you would. Now, the problem with this is that how do you know that tracking, even though it's better, is accurate? Because the more variables you're adding, the more complicated that data set becomes. So an example of this, we have a client, and we do a lot of Shopify stuff, which does exactly this. It connects via the API, the domain is all locked into the account. And we have a certain client of ours who has a practice, and this is their internal setup of how they've done things, and they're actually trying to work to change it. But when they finish a crowdfunding project, they import all their emails into Shopify because that's where their shipping systems are. And what we've noticed is that really screws up the meta ads, because meta ads works on a 7-day attribution window. If someone who's on that email list has also seen an ad, when they're imported to Shopify, Facebook will think that purchase, the import, has been a result of Meta, and will attribute that import to Meta ads, even though what had nothing to do with Meta ads. So here's an example of how like adding data doesn't necessarily improve things. It can actually really complicate your targeting and muddy the waters. So who knows what's happening with all these different emails being imported and exported out of Gamefound with all these different traffic sources, how that's going to muddy the waters in terms of their tracking ability. So I don't see that as a positive. I actually see that as a two-edged sword. Yes, there's an element where you would have better targeting, but there's also an element where you would really confuse and mix up the data. So it's actually, in one way, it's much better to have your own Shopify store that's completely separate from Gamefound, because you can really localize and focus the data points. And then I think the other elephant in the room, right, is that you're giving all your data that you produce from your ads, from your ad spend, you're giving that all to Gamefound. And that's all exceptionally valuable. That's stuff that you need yourself to grow your
Yeah.
business. It's very important that you own your email list. And not only own your email list and your client base, you own the data that they have. And also that you take responsibility for your customers' data. Because if GameFound ever had a hack, like a data breach, then all the information that's on GameFound, the centralized
Yeah.
institution, all becomes leaked. Whilst if each publisher had their own separate um, system where they had their own clients' data and locked into their own accounts, it's much harder for hackers because it's all decentralized. It's much harder for them to go from different
Yeah.
publisher to different publisher to hack their stuff. Whilst GameFound is sort of like almost opening themselves up for an attack for hackers to kind of do a data breach because there's so much data there. So that's something I think people need to appreciate when um, it almost reminds me of like the conquistadors who came to South America. They came over and like the locals who were all dripped in gold, and they're like, "Oh, here, have some matches, and here's a mirror." And they were trading these kind of trinkets, which were convenient. It's convenient to have matches. It's convenient to have a mirror, but they're trading it for gold. And I kind of feel like people need to realize how valuable the data points that your customers produce, how valuable that is, and it's so important that you have access to that and that you can control that. So giving that to Gamefound is a really good deal for Gamefound. So it's
Yeah.
just something you want to keep in mind as well. It's like, uh, yeah, they might appear like a really good deal, but Gamefound is really benefiting as well from you keeping your audience on Gamefound and feeding their data points. I would suggest that if you want longevity, you want to grow your business, you need to own your audience, you need to own the data points that your audience creates, and you need to safeguard that because they've entrusted you with their emails, they've entrusted you with very personal information like their shipping addresses and things. This is stuff that you really need to make sure doesn't fall into the wrong hands.
Yeah, it's interesting because what you said was, it's really good for GameFound. I think GameFound cares about GameFound is kind of where one of my conclusions. GameFound cares about growing GameFound. It's a company that is heavily investing into that as a platform. They're working really hard. They're doing a lot of really good things. But what I find is it's very easy at the moment to switch from Kickstarter to GameFound. Like as a creator, you could go take all of your emails, take all of your stuff, and you've got Kickstarter followers, which really are I would say you should be, unless you don't have an email list and you're just using Kickstarter followers, you've got Kickstarter updates and things like that. But most solid creators are going to have email lists, and in fact I would say all nearly all of them will. And then when you go to GameFound using AdFound's marketing system, the goal is going to be to get followers and to increase your backer count on GameFound, and not to build emails and other things like that. And again, as you said, like they have the data on their company's Meta account, which is good for them. So as they grow in Meta, they'll be able to get greater levels of support and also like discounts off of what they spend and that kind of thing. This is something that big companies do all the time. Like as a Google partner, you get you get service. Like we're a Google partner, we get service from Google staff when we have a problem. But you can be I forget what it's called off the top of my head, but it's basically like a premier partner where you actually get 15% of the ad spend that goes through your account comes back to you as a check, or comes back to you as like a discount off of what you owe Google. So when Haibu Yellow Book is like one of the biggest ad spend companies, they spend at least 10 million a month in ads for various clients. They spend $10 million of their clients' money and they charge their clients $10 million. In addition, they charge service fees like every business does, and they have lots and lots of clients. But they charge service fees like every business does. But then Google gives them a kickback of 15% of that 10 million. So they make $1.5 million more for doing this, in essence, the same amount of work that someone else in that is not a premier partner would do. So Google, and other companies have this too. So it benefits GameFound to have to run your stuff in their account. There are certain bits of convenience, like if your credit card goes bad or something like that, like Gamefound is going to charge you, and they have, if you crowdfunded with them, they have your money. They will get paid. Like you won't have an option to not pay them. They're they're in full control of that money, so they're going to get paid. Which is not something that I could say. If I were to be spending money or client money and on my credit card, and then somebody were to stiff me with the bill, then I would be, I don't know what I would do. I certainly couldn't call Google and say, hey, $1,000, can you just not charge me for that because the client didn't, so Google or Yelp or those people, they don't care. They're going to charge the credit card on file. So point is that Gamefound is bringing people to their platform to use their system. And if their system, let's just say, goes away in some shape or form, it stops existing, then you stop existing. And you kind of, the only thing you have are is word of mouth. Hopefully people remember you, and hopefully you had an email list and social communities and other things like that. But you have to restart if you rely on Gamefound's system. And for that matter, if you rely on Kickstarter's system, you can't be reliant on these types of systems. You need to have your own email list, and you need to be communicating with them, because that, in the end, is the single most valuable asset that a company has. A company like Modifius Entertainment, we were talking about the size of their email list. It's in excess of 200,000 people, and they send emails like every week, and they make money every single week. I remember I used to send, I had an email list, an email client that sold a product that I would send 2 emails a week, and every single email send would be between $15,000 and $30,000 that we would make. So in general, like as a creator, if you want to not only make a product and see it enter the world, like if it's your first time doing this and you're listening to this podcast thinking, how can I do better at marketing? You want to have the mindset of a long term, that you're going to be in business for a second project and a third project. So you should treat it right up front like a business. You need to maintain your email addresses, maintain your email list. You need to have that you can, so that you can talk to your people, and they will follow you wherever you go. If you have ownership of those things. If you go, for example, to Gamefound and you rely on their follower system, Gamefound has their email addresses, and they will not give them to you. They will only give them to you if they back. And this is something, kind of going into some of what I've seen from Gamefound just in general. So this is some of my reflections of looking at we've been a part of a lot of Gamefound projects at this point, big ones, small ones, and everything in between. And the problems that I see just in regard to Gamefound followers is that it seems that sometimes followers can have an absurdly low conversion rate on Gamefound. And it's almost like you get a ton of followers and only a certain portion of them are serious. And there's a certain portion that, on some campaigns that just I don't know if they never intended to back or what, but it's like the conversion rate of those followers is so much lower than Kickstarter. Like the average of Kickstarter conversion ranges between 15 to 25% conversion rate from Kickstarter followers, depending on how excited they are about a product. That's generally what I expect with with followers, because you've got a lot of people on your email list that also followed, a lot of people that follow that are also in your social communities. But with Gamefound, it seems like there's this big disparity between, it's like a lot of quote unquote Gamefound users that are not a part of your email list or your communities. And then when your project launches, I don't know, it's like if it's not super duper newsworthy, they're not going to back or something. I don't know. It's like versus the normal fan is researched your game and is excited about it to back on day one, right?
Could be an issue. I don't know if there's a capture system when you follow, because it could just literally just be bots where I think that's a problem with the internet in general. I think every social platform has a problem with this. So it could just be, accounts crawling, following random stuff. And so that might be a way to kind of minimize things like that.
Yeah. I mean, it feels like the certain projects that I'm thinking about are projects that are featured in Gamefound feasts, which are projects, in essence, the
Okay, got it.
projects we love button for Gamefound are a quarterly blog post talking about the upcoming Gamefound projects, and a lot of the big headliners like, whatever, Modifius's Terry Pratchett's Discworld, or Chip Theory Games Elder Scrolls, or whatever. Those are like headliners there, or Cyberpunk 2077. Those are the big headliners. And then you've got other projects that people might like. And a lot of these projects will get a lot of followers, like 30,000. I've seen projects with like 30,000 followers that just do not convert very well at all. A lot of CMON projects that have been this way on Gamefound, where it seems like they had so many followers and they kind of crash and burned. There are others that, that I don't want to like name any particular project. I don't want to like throw too much shade at individual creators or anything, but it feels like there are a lot of Gamefound users. I think that they're legit Gamefound users that are not, they're not put into the funnel in the correct way. So like they see an ad, or however they see the blog post, they click on your project, and then they follow. They follow for a free gift or whatever. And then they don't look at your project until after they get a notification from Gamefound that says you launched. And I think that they're just not very interested in your project. They haven't looked into it, but they're looking at other projects, and they're committed to other projects and not yours, And so our process is that when you get somebody to, to look at your landing page, or, when you get somebody on your email list, that you would send information to them so that they would get excited about what it is that you're making, and, have like an actual experience with some of your content, and, learn about what the pledge levels are going to be, and what the game is like. And so that when you launch on day one, you should have like an extremely high conversion rate from followers to backers, because they're ready to back. Like they're people that you've readied and prepared for your day one, or just generally your campaign. And so that's what we usually see when we do this thing. When you build emails and you send emails to those people on your list and whatnot, you get consistent results. And I feel like a lot of the emphasis on followers is a bad thing, in my opinion. Like, regardless of Kickstarter or Gamefound, you should not have your primary metric be how many followers are on my campaign. It's actually not a good metric unless you have all of the other infrastructure that you would own, like your email list and your social communities. It'd be like the equivalent of, you can use Gamefound's Discord. Like, you can create a channel for your game inside Gamefound's Discord server. Or you could just create your own Discord server, and then you own the Discord server, and whatever you say goes, and whoever jumps in, the main topic of discussion is your product. So I would much rather have a community like that I controlled. And same thing with a Facebook group, right? So, and another thing is the email list in particular kind of future proofs you from changing technology. So, we're talking about like, oh, you got to make sure to own your meta ads and your Facebook community. Well, what if Facebook goes out of business one day? They're obviously, getting bigger and bigger rather than going out of business, but it's not, they won't be like not necessarily the biggest ones, or, forever. What if TikTok eventually eclipses Facebook as far as the effectiveness of ads or whatever, or some other program, or Google revamps and
Or
becomes like the
CEOs
number one thing?
change and the company revamps the company that, half the people leave, like Twitter or whatever,
Right. So yeah, so the one thing that's consistent with all of these platforms is that the email list can and or maybe new technology comes about. Like when I started in 2021 with our first Kickstarter, like, and I'm speaking with my publisher hat on, I Discord wasn't something that I used, and then Discord became bigger and bigger, and we created a Discord server, and everyone from my email list, I let them know that we have a Discord server, and now we have like 1,300 members or more, and it's something that has become like the number one place if you want to get rules questions answered, if you want to just kind of hang out and talk about our games and whatnot, that's like a really good place. It's super active, got a lot of really great people that use it on the regular, and like that exists because I had an email list that I could let everybody know. Like, do you think Facebook wants me to bring all their users to Discord? No way. They want to keep those users on Facebook. So every post I've ever made that had a Discord link on Facebook got like one like, and that like was my mom, you know? And so I think that that's a really, really important thing to consider, you know? It's like,
This is the danger of centralization, right? The advantages of centralization, this comes to all systems, governments to businesses to whatever, is that they can be very efficient and very convenient for people, as long as the centralized systems maintain integrity and competency. So if they lose integrity or they become incompetent, then you basically have tyranny. This is where
yeah,
things get really bad. And we've seen this with certain companies like MailChimp. Like MailChimp has owned a huge percentage of the email marketing demographic, and they can
almost
basically
70%, by the
and
way.
they can
It used to
basically do
almost
what they
be, yeah,
want, right? And
yeah.
they've just increased their fees to crazy things. They charge you for unsubscribers, things which are just like
Mhm.
crazy. YouTube is another one. You know, YouTube is kind of like synonymous with videos on the internet now, and they can really do what they want as well in terms of promoting certain creators above others, censoring certain content and things. So these are not
Yep.
really great systems. This is the problem with centralization, and I think this is my probably biggest gripe with GameFound and even Kickstarter now because it's moving in the same direction. Is they're really trying to like capture the entire market. They
Want to
want
be
to
like the
be
all-in-one solution
they
for
want to be the all-in-one
everyone.
solution for everything, and I don't think this is great for customers because I think, and this is we kind of mentioned this with Alex and the previous um,
Mhm.
conversation we had, but it actually changes the focus of the like who is the customer here. At the end of the day, it's all about the user who's going there and backing games. And if you're focusing on the creator, you're actually kind of like focusing on your investor because they're investing in the company. But like if you only focus on them, you could sort of neglect the customer, and the customer is the one who makes. This is the same problem you have with these massive investment
Yep.
companies like BlackRock and Vanguard and
Mhm.
these companies who are really not serving their customers anymore. They're serving their investors, and the investors become the customers, and the customers just become the consumer, the human resource that feeds the machine, and the
Yeah.
machine is really designed to make profits for the investor, not to serve the customer. And I think this is the danger of centralized systems. And I hope this isn't the case with GameFound. I'm not saying this is the case currently, but they're moving in this direction, which isn't healthy. And I'm pro decentralization. I really like the fact that the systems we implement is you use Facebook, you're using GameFound, using Kickstarter, using MailerLite, you're using all these different systems that you're combining to create something that's super robust. And underneath it all, the foundation is your email list, which you own, and the data points,
Yep.
which you own and control. And as we see, we go back to like, this is relevant because I've actually had two conversations this week with our clients because they're concerned about Meta. Now, Meta is making some pretty big changes. Some people aren't very happy with Zuckerberg and some of his announcements. And
Mhm.
I say, look, you don't use Facebook because you like Mark Zuckerberg. You don't
Yeah.
use Google because you like the CEO. You don't use any of these platforms because you like the people running them. You use
Mhm.
them because they are effective for your business and it's where your customers are. You use them
Yep.
because they help you serve your customers. And if as long as you're constantly thinking of your customers and how it benefits your customers, look, your relationship
Yep.
to GameFound, to Kickstarter, to Meta, to Twitter, or whatever platform is only conducive to how it benefits your customers. And if it
Yep.
stops benefiting your customers, or you stop getting meaningful results from it, you
Mhm.
switch platform, you have no allegiance to these systems. So
Yep.
just keep that in mind. Like, yeah, it's not beyond the possibilities of um, systems like Meta rising and falling. Like look at MySpace, which on the shelves of
Yep.
irrelevance, but 20 years ago was like the place to be. So this is not outside the realms of possibility. So really thinking long term, owning your audience,
Mhm.
understanding that centralized systems will eventually become corrupt to some
Yeah.
degree. They will, and
Yep.
to try own your own audience.
Exactly. So, like, to kind of put it in perspective, what we're recommending is that you should be the center of your system, of your marketing engine or your marketing bubble. So, if you look at imagine like a bike tire, you're the center uh, pin of that tire. All of the spokes going from the outside of the tire in connect at like this central steel hub that would represent you. all of the connection points represent the individual systems that you can use to access the outside, which is all the customers in the world. All the potential customers in the world represent the outside of the bike tire. So I use Facebook like a parasite, or maybe more accurately, it's a symbiotic relationship, because Facebook is using me like a parasite too, because I'm leveraging Facebook for its user base, and I attract its users to my system. I get them on my email list and whatnot. So they come to me. So I gain advantage by leveraging Facebook's technology and their customers. And Facebook uses me by taking my data as well as the data that I've gathered on their platform to make their platform better. They sell it to the government. They do all this other stuff that I would rather, I don't mind them making their platform better, but I would rather they didn't do certain things, but that they do. But that is the nature of this.
The beast.
Yeah, so that's why I used the word parasitic, because it feels like symbiotic is like it's good for both. But it's like, if Facebook ends up becoming obsolete, I'm not going to try to keep it alive. I'm going to find what works best and then use that. And I will have a relationship with those things. It's like a transactional relationship.
Yes.
It's not because I love Facebook that I use Facebook. It's because Facebook gets me results, the best results. And so, same thing goes with X and with TikTok and whatever. Like, I would pay money in order to get the best results. And so I think that the important thing is you have to own the I guess the fruit of your labor. If you're using Gamefound and kind of buying into the whole system of Gamefound, then you're actually buying into, I will say, like, a very one-way relationship, a one-way transactional relationship. So if Gamefound has control over what it is that you do. So I always recommend against that. So that's why I don't like AdFound, and I'm a little less excited about if people want to work on Gamefound, I think that's fine, but I am a little bit sus of Gamefound unless you're using it correctly, which is, man, you own everything and not leveraging a lot of systems. So now let's talk about something related. You mentioned trust, and you want to be able to trust the systems that you're using, to a point, right? Like, I don't trust Mark Zuckerberg very much, but I trust the reliability of their system to generate ads and so on, right? So so Gamefound listed on this article, which is the blog post that they wrote at the beginning of January this year. On Gamefound, we gathered over $156 million USD, including, over projects like, board games, terrain, accessories, and RPGs. And they are combining about $85 million. So they listed over $85 million in crowdfunding, with over $71 million in the late pledge. And they, they categorize that as like all tabletop projects. So tabletop in particular is like an important word. When Kickstarter says, "Oh, I have gained," so we've earned so much money in the tabletop space, they're actually including accessories like board game tables, actual board games, RPGs, and things like STL files for 3D printed miniatures and stuff like that. So they kind of combine all of those things into the tabletop category. And in addition to that, things like tarot cards and like supplements and things. So so Gamefound, the numbers that Kickstarter did last year in the entire tabletop category was $216,685,854. That is based on the statistics from tabletopanalytics.com for annual activity. And they had a total of 5,339 live projects in the tabletop category. That's among RPGs, accessories, etc. If we look at specifically board games, and this is where this is where Gamefound makes its case. Board games in specific, on Kickstarter, you had $113,715,681 raised in 2024 for board games on Kickstarter. This excludes, board game tables, etc. And then instead of 5,300 projects, it's 1,238 projects. So you still had more money that Kickstarter raised. 113. Well, we'll just round up and say 114 million versus Gamefound's 85 million. But what they're doing is they're saying, we're the number one platform because we raised over 156 million. They're counting their pledge manager and their actual dollars raised in crowdfunding.
And VAT.
And they're counting VAT. Yeah. So so all of the numbers combined. And so what they're doing here is they're comparing apples to oranges, and they're kind of like misdirecting people, saying we're the number one platform if you look at it in this funny way. But if you compare apples to apples, Gamefound made 85 million and Kickstarter made 114, and via crowdfunding. And then you consider something else, which is Gamefound had, I want to say Alex Radcliffe was on last week, and he shared that there were like 360 projects that Gamefound ran last year. Gamefound made $85 million with 360 projects. And if the number is not exactly accurate, it's close to that number. But then when you look at Kickstarter and the numbers, again, this is Tabletop Analytics, 1,238 projects made a total of 114 million. So you had, we'll say, nearly 4 times as many projects launched on Kickstarter as on Gamefound. And you didn't have, nearly 4 times the funding. It went from 85 to 113. So what is that? About 30 million more or so. The difference, so 4 times as many projects made, an additional 30 or 40% revenue over, so Kickstarter has way more projects and, per project, much less revenue. What this shows me is that Gamefound is highly, highly concentrated at the top end. So, you've got other stats that that Gamefound uses. So Gamefound said that 8 of the top 10 crowdfunding campaigns in 2024 were actually on Gamefound. You had Cyberpunk 2077, which raised 7.6 million, Lands of Evershade 7.4 million, and you've got all these other projects. And I want to say the 2 projects on I can't remember which the projects on Kickstarter, but which ones they were rather. So the numbers on Gamefound are really, really skewed when you take out like the top, the massive creator projects, and they become very suspect to me when you look at like normal creators that don't have a huge name behind them or a huge intellectual property or a huge company like, for example, Awaken Realms or Simon or I believe Arkan Studios did Heroes of Might and Magic, and I think Glass. I can't remember who it was that did Cyberpunk, but you've got like these very large creators that are not or Chip Theory Games, you've got like big creators that are well known, making up the majority of the money that Gamefound gets. And so when you look at Kickstarter, it looks to me like you've got a bunch of, and that, by the way, that's all money that Kickstarter used to make. So how upset is Kickstarter? They changed their CEOs, right? But so I believe Gamefound's here to stay. But the thing is, like, I don't think that Gamefound is a great platform to use when you look at the numbers apples to apples. If you're like a small to medium sized creator, it's excellent for the big creators with big projects. But it's and there are outliers, like we talked last week about
expansions. I think that's why Alex focused on expansions. In his mind, that was the closest way to get apples to apples.
Yeah, but then he only used expansions that were that raised $200,000 or more, and it was and I don't know. I mean, it just seemed like, for example, expansion and reprint. You've got huge projects like Castles of Burgundy Special Edition, Puerto Rico Special Edition, a lot of other things like that raised, $3.5 million or $3 million, you know? And so I'm not sure what data is being included. I know that we can't see it, which is you know, unfortunate. We only can go off of what Alex shared and, you know, what the numbers are listed on the blog post. But it sure looks to me like you stand a much better chance of earning audience on Kickstarter than you do on Gamefound. This also kind of lends itself to the idea that you are much more likely to earn pledges via organic traffic on Kickstarter than you are likely to earn organic traffic or pledges via organic traffic on Gamefound. I believe that Kickstarter and Gamefound both are dominantly fueled by individual creators and the email lists that they bring on a daily basis. You know, you've got projects launching, and all of those people are reminded to go to Kickstarter. 1,200 projects in the tabletop, or 5,300 in the overall tabletop space, versus like 360. Even though the creators are larger, they're repeat projects from creators, you know, big creators using Gamefound multiple times in the year. So Simon using it, you know, 3 times or whatever. And I just think that you've got a lot more going on Kickstarter that is actually organic. And the Kickstarter has earned its reputation over the years, and that's why, you know, a lot of people use Kickstarter. A lot of people are used to using Kickstarter, and so, you know, you've got a lot of projects on Kickstarter, and they're losing the big ones. I wouldn't be surprised if they started going after tabletop creators to kind of incentivize the big ones to come back and to stay, because that's what Gamefound's doing. Gamefound is sapping the big creators, and Kickstarter will probably start. I mean, if I were Kickstarter, I would start offering deals to the big creators, the guys that raise millions of dollars in the tabletop space, to stay there, and you know, give them things that they're looking for. So, which is going to kind of help stop the bleeding of all of those projects, right? So, yeah. So there's a lot to kind of take away from the, well, I guess a lot more that we know now, and it seems like the average everyday creator is better off on Kickstarter based on the numbers in my, you know, just trying to compare apples to apples. Once you take away the big money of the large projects, I think that you know, and what we've seen, like, hands on, I think you know, there are a lot of people that have gone to Gamefound that had decent projects that I felt like would have funded on Kickstarter, or would have funded more on Kickstarter, but, you know, they stall after day one because, you know, there's no organic traffic
And to be
that
fair,
is
you know,
going there.
it's difficult comparing Kickstarter to GameFound because GameFound is relatively new, right? So
Yeah.
you're comparing a platform that's been around for decades versus a platform that has really been around for 3 years or so. So it's even at that, it's difficult to compare. Look, I think one of
Yep.
the huge advantages of GameFound for customers is stretch pay. I think that's a really great idea. It allows people, I think, to pledge at higher tiers and to sort of spread the burden. There's no reason why you have to pay everything up front, especially if it's not going to be fulfilled in a year. It makes perfect sense to be paying in increments monthly over 8 months or so. So I think that's a really cool thing, and I think that a lot of uh, I think a lot of customers will appreciate that feature on GameFound. Something I want to bring up as well that I think it kind of ties into all of this is that they say something on this blog, and it's that you don't have to create your own meta account. And I feel like that's overemphasized because it takes about 15 minutes to make your business account. And if you know what you're doing, it would literally take about 2 minutes. So I feel like that is not a real massive selling point. I kind of feel like they're kind of making that sound like, oh yeah, it's so much work to create your meta account, but really it's about 15 minutes of work. If you know what you're doing, it's about 2 minutes of work. And then another thing is, you know, the burden of work. So it's all well and good for them saying they're going to take on all these accounts and run all these ads, but at what point do they become overburdened, right? Because, you know, we as a marketing agency are very conscious of this, that we can only take on so many clients per person before you really don't have the ability to properly look at ad accounts.
Yep.
So we have systems in our company where we allocate accounts to people and we limit the amount of accounts people can have to a point where we will either turn people away or increase our fees. And usually it's fine because we have enough staff so we can take on burdens. And usually it's like, okay, we're going to overcrank, we're going to work super hard and kind of put the pedal to the metal because we know it's only for a season, and we're going to these accounts aren't going to be here for a very long time. But I do wonder, do they have the ability to take on large amounts of accounts? Is this going to be something? My fear is that there will be systems where they'll take assets, they'll just blop them into some type of broad ad targeting, and then just let it run. And they're not really going to be A/B testing and kind of trying to find niche audiences and things. So that's something that might be a cause of concern, is do they actually have the systems in place, the ability to take on, 300 projects at the same time in 1 month, because everyone's launching, and you got the pre-launches and live ads and pledge manager ads and all these other kind of systems in place. No, they might have that, but that's something I would be concerned about. Is there going to be kind of like this kind of set it and forget it type of approach to this system?
My experience with other providers that have done performance-based marketing is that that's exactly what it is. It's a set it and forget it, and actually kind of maybe some we'll use AI to even develop the ads, and all the Gamefound ads that I've seen have been less than impressive with the actual ad text and headline and that kind of thing. I know nobody's looking at this stuff. Like, there's at least they're not looking and actively making changes that improve results. Rather, what they're doing, the way that they improve results is they let they use their massive data sets to start companies off in the most profitable manner, and they which is an awesome thing that they get to do. But the problem is, like, if you have like a one person doing this versus like the entirety of your client list, you have 100 creators all using your same data set and running ads, you start to like run out of number one, you run out of time to work with each one of them, depending on how many actually marketing people that you have. Like you said, like we have really 5 of us at this company that can actively take on ads if we needed to. I guess 4 probably, but then we limit, because in order to effectively look at an account and say, these are changes that we need to make. And did you know, like we've talked about, my own ads, how you're working on the ads and you notice like this particular headline's performing really well. So we use that we started using things like that in Kickstarter, our Kickstarter page. We made sure to emphasize that in, elsewhere. But it feels like you're not, with a performance-based company like this, you need to take on a lot of clients, because you need a lot of revenue or a lot of ad spend coming in so that you can make your 5% off of every sale. But then the problem arises when there is a problem account. So it's like when one account doesn't perform to par, who is going to be the first one to notice that? Am I, as the client, going to be the first one to notice that? Or is Gamefound going to say, hey, there's some trouble here, let's spend some extra time on this account and make it profitable? My experience with other performance marketing agencies is that they will not do that. They do not have the expertise to do it right. So if you want, really, it's like the reason we get paid in marketing is because we know the answer why, or we can discover the answer as to why. So why are the ads performing well? We can figure that out. Why are the ads performing poorly? We can figure that out. We can change it. If we know why, then we can fix it. The problem that I see at most performance marketing agencies is that they have a really great system, but if your project just doesn't perform like the next project, you're often left not knowing why, and they can't usually fix it. So most of the time in cases like that, the temptation is to start blaming the game itself as not very good, or the creator's not very good, but in actuality it's probably just the positioning of the product itself, and if you use ads correctly, we can figure out why and fix it. So one other thing I wanted to mention, and we can get into this later, is like individual creators that did better on one platform versus the other. But if you had any thoughts, any feedback on the first, what what I just shared? Go for it.
No, I think that's if you want to. I do have another point, but it's something different altogether. So if you want
Okay.
to dive into this, but I think I would just kind of caveat anything you're saying is it's difficult to compare apples to apples, if we say, because they are very different platforms in terms just of age. So I
Mhm.
think Kickstarter has a huge advantage simply because it's older and it's
Right.
got a lot more user base. So it's difficult to compare. That doesn't say that there isn't look, I think the things that Gamefound has achieved is quite impressive. I don't want to, dunk on their efforts too much, and there it looks very promising. So,
Mhm.
where's Gamefound going to be in 5, 10 years? That's going to be exciting. I think that's when you're going to start seeing, basically no real difference between Kickstarter and Gamefound.
Yeah. Well, so that's kind of why I wanted to look at the individual creators. There were a couple of them that I'm bringing up now because I asked Alex about these specific creators, and he did not have a good answer for me. In fact, he even said he wasn't sure why they didn't perform as well. And so, one of them was that I brought up, and this is not me trying to dunk on Gamefound after, but I brought them on to give them an opportunity to speak to these things. And Dwarven Forge was one where it was modular terrain, game terrain. They had a project, for example, Wildlands, that generated $4 million on Kickstarter. I want to say it was in like 2022, and then in 2023, their last campaign they ran was like 26 or it was $3.5 million raised. So it was like they have for their big projects, they have very consistent numbers. And then they ran a couple of campaigns, and I don't know exactly when these campaigns ran because some of them are like pledge managers, but they haven't broken $2 million, including their pledge manager funding raised. But like if I go to the Dwarven Forge, hand painted, let's say the latest Dwarven Forge campaign, it raised 1.7 million from like half the backers. And it's like a really, really great page and everything. And so I'm wondering why did these campaigns not do as well? Another one that like it's like a huge difference. Like that's a double the amount if they just stuck with Kickstarter from what it looks like. And then and that's just from like the outside, and we can talk about like reasons why that might be. But another one is the Dice Tower. The Dice Tower,
Mm,
I looked at like every year in January they do a fundraise for like one more year of content, and I want to say the pledge or the funding goal is always around $275 or $285,000, and that allows them to keep the lights on for another year, and combined with their sponsorships and other things like that. And they typically raise like $170,000 on day one. um and this was, I want to say, their last last Dice Tower campaign. That's exactly what it did raise. And then here we are, like 6 or 7 days into their campaign, they're still at 160,000. So them moving to Gamefound was a major. I mean, it was like, oh man, what happened? It was like their fund total is abysmal compared to Kickstarter last year at this time. And I don't I it's hard to say exactly why, but like this is me kind of trying to compare apples to apples and say, well, why did it work like this? And Alex made a good point that it's easy to say, okay, you've got a project that was on Kickstarter, now it switched to Gamefound and didn't do as well. Well, I'm sure that there are examples of projects that used Gamefound and switched to Kickstarter and didn't do as well. Um, and I'm not denying that that's not possible. I haven't found any that started on Gamefound and now use Kickstarter and did really well on Gamefound, but then totally bombed on Kickstarter. I haven't found any of those, or at least none are apparent to me from what I've, from research and all that. But these two creators are examples of like long-standing creators with long, very well storied followers, and then they go from one place to another. So in theory, they should be able to take their fans with them or whatever, but like it just did not translate, and I wonder why that is. I'm disturbed as to why that is, and it's one of the reasons that I didn't want to go from for Deliverance. Our first campaign and our second campaign were both on Kickstarter. I didn't want to do a campaign on Gamefound because I was concerned that I would not do as well. Even though I was one of those statistics that was like a reprint plus an expansion, we ended up doing about 60% more. And I think I want to say Alex said the Kickstarter average was 3% more from one to like a Kickstarter for a game to the Kickstarter with a reprint and expansion. So maybe my campaign was an outlier, but it sure felt like I hit the numbers that I expected to hit and did better, than that because it went a little viral in the middle. So I don't know. I mean, I'm very torn about this, and I consider Steamforged a Dwarven Forge like a big creator, and I'm not sure about the Dice Tower. And I mentioned Lucky Duck Games as another one that
Which
was
the Dice Tower, don't count your eggs before they hatch. There's still 8 days left,
right.
so it's still possible they could fund, and then so you kind of need to compare at the very end. It's not conclusive yet, but yeah, from the get go, there does seem to be a lag, and it simply could be because a lot of people maybe who support the Dice Tower, their older accounts, they're not really crowdfunding too often. They just get that email coming, oh yeah, the Dice Tower, I'll support that this year or whatever. So that could be a possibility. So they haven't really been in the kind of Dice Tower community too much, and therefore they haven't been notified of what's happening on Gamefound. That's just my theory.
Well, so if you look at, for example, let's see, we're 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, like 6 days in. They raised, and I want to say they did. So for their 2024 campaign, Dice Tower ran a 26-day campaign. That was on the 7th of January last year to the 3rd of February. They are running a shorter campaign this year, but they had a total funding at the end of that time of $380,000. And given 6 days in, so if we look at day 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, they had $259,984 is what they recorded that they had raised on day 6. 259,000. Well, it's really 260 because it's like $16 short from 260,000.
So it's 100,000 more than what
It's
they
literally
currently have.
100,000 more. And let me see where are they at. They funded 2 days after that. So they reached 275,000, I want to say, or maybe it was like 3 days after that, something like that. They reached their mid campaign and then they kind of slowed down, but still the funding is like so drastically different, and I don't exactly know why. I mean, so certain things I brought up with Alex were like, could it be the economy? Could it be like, that people are not as willing to spend as they used to be? And Alex, he actually kind of shared that he didn't think that was it because it was there were other effects like that you would see all over. I think that it has something to do with it, but not such. I don't think that it's the only reason that would cause that drop. So I have my suspicion as to why, but I'd love to hear your thoughts. I don't know if you wanted to bring anything else up.
I do have something else, but it's probably it's like a different topic involving Gamefound. So yeah, I'd love to hear your theories to why you think there's disparity here.
Yeah, so I think that these campaigns, these companies, were so they have used the Dice Tower. So like the Dice Tower has used Kickstarter every single year for a lot of years. If we look at the number of projects that Tom the account is run by Tom Vassell, you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 times they've run this Kickstarter. And So from 2013 all the way to 2024, they've run this every single year, and they raised a little bit more in 2023 than in 2024, but it was a difference of $30,000. So $410,000 was what they raised in 2023. $380,000 was what they raised in 2024. That was kind of where. So anyway, I think I wouldn't say that economy was like, it's not responsible for losing, $220,000 or whatever, 200. Anyway, so I would say they have fans that have been on the Kickstarter platform for so long. Those fans may not have even backed the Kickstarter, or I'm sorry, they may not even back games on Kickstarter anymore. But because the Dice Tower's there and they regularly watch Dice Tower, there are a lot of people that follow them. There are a lot of people that will respond and receive their updates for previous campaigns, and a lot of other things like that. And so I think they have kind of fallen victim in some ways to using Kickstarter as a system and not holding everything internally. So they probably don't have like a huge email list of hardcore supportive people. I think they tend to use like their YouTube channel as like the focus, but then if fans fall off and stop watching YouTube videos, then they forget the Dice Tower exists. But because Kickstarter is something that they constantly, or they might still use when Dice Tower launches a project, sure, I'll get some promos for games that I play or that I like. And so I think Dwarven Forge has created 10 projects. So they created 10 different projects, and they I want to say the very first project, they crushed it with like $2 million of funding way back in like 2014 or 2015 maybe. And so that's kind of where I see these creators are veteran creators that might not have owned their their email list and that kind of thing. They didn't keep their fans active and engaged on various social media in the same way. And
Essentially, Kickstarter owns their audience, is what you're saying, so that they
that's
weren't able
kind of
to
what
then
I'm saying.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that what we're warning people about from not letting Gamefound be your all-in-one communication, marketing, everything platform. I think that maybe, and this is just my suspicion,
Makes
I know
switching
more
harder.
about I know more about the Dice Tower than I do about Dwarven Forge, but I think that there are it's certainly possible that these projects and then in addition to that, one other thing is the organic traffic is undeniable. Every single one of Dwarven Forge's projects, for example, got the Kickstarter or the Projects We Love badge. Every single one, all 10 of them or whatever. And then the Dice Tower, I don't know how many actually earned Project We Love. I don't know if any of them did or not, but those supporters were there. So I'm much more likely, like if I use Kickstarter as a creator, I'm likely to continue to use Kickstarter rather than jumping ship for anything other than Kickstarter doesn't want me. But I think that it's important to just keep your email list, keep control of your stuff.
So I think one issue I'd like to bring up, and we can wrap up with this, is there's an expression that rising tide lifts all ships. I think one of the issues is with the system, like Kickstarter is now guilty of this as well because they're going down the same path, is that when they seek to do everything, they push out all these other industries. And all those industries all have their own networks, their own connections. So by kind of pushing out, let's say, Gamefound's now handling that for you. Well, there would have been companies that would have handled that for you. Or now they're doing fulfillment.
A big one, I think, is a pledge manager. Like a good example is so BackerKit used to just be a pledge manager, and they were kind of, I think, the number one pledge manager. But then Gamefound announced, that they would be a pledge manager. But not only that, they're a crowdfunding platform. And then Kickstarter announced, this is a big one, is one of the nails in the coffin almost, is that not the last one, but one of them is that Kickstarter now gives pledge management services. And so that cut probably half or 2/3 of BackerKit's business between the two of them. And rather than, you know, working with BackerKit or whatever to promote it, it seems like they're saying, "Hey, BackerKit's making a lot of money. Why don't we make that money for ourselves instead?" You know.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's one example. And I think marketing
And then,
is
and
some
I
of the
think,
same.
and then what that does is that it sort of alienates those audiences, because now those companies aren't going to be, they're going to be less enthusiastic, let's just say, to, bring their audiences, their network, their connections to a platform which could then turn around and really take all of their labors, their efforts, and their resources in building all those connections and things. And I'll kind of point out a case study, because you see this with social media sites as well,
Mhm.
where I think that one of the problems, and we've seen this with Facebook trying to do live stuff and failing horribly, and
Yeah.
you know, Google, what was that? Google Plus, wasn't they had a social site called Google
Yeah,
Plus at one
yeah, it was
stage, and
Google Plus.
it failed like horribly, trying to be a social site and things like that. And one that comes to my mind is like a, a social site called Gab, and
Mhm.
it's this one that is sort of rising. A lot of people go to it because it's sort of a site that's known for free speech. So when people get kicked off a certain site, they go to Gab, sort of like the default.
Yep.
This is where I go if I'm angry. And one of the problems I've noticed with Gab, because in digital marketing, we always want to keep an eye on all these different digital marketing spaces, like Blue Sky, whatever's popping up. Just have a look at them. What's happening there? Is there an area to like advertise here or whatever? And one thing I noticed with the Gab platform is that they tried to do exactly this. They tried to be everything. And what they ended up doing is they ended up competing with their own audience base. Because let's say, for example, you're a blogger and you write blogs and you want to share, maybe it's even the news or something or whatever it is. Well, Gab has their own blog, so now you're competing on their platform with the actual company who owns their own blog. And say, okay, well, let's say that you sell merchandise, you sell shirts and T-shirts. Well, Gab sells merchandise, so now you're competing with the actual platform itself. Um, let's say you're a celebrity and you want to garner a big following. Well, the entirety of Gab it follows the CEO of the company. He's like the celebrity of the company. It's the same with Twitter now, where Elon Musk has become the centerpiece, and everyone's trying to basically suck up to Elon Musk to get a retweet, because that's how you optimize that platform now. It's just by trying to get a retweet from Elon Musk. So it kind of pushes celebrities away. It pushes people who are trying to sell merchandise away. It pushes people who write blogs away, because this one company is trying to do everything, and by trying to do everything, they're actually competing with everything. Whereas if they just focused on being a social site, keep the main thing the main thing, I think they would have had a lot more success in growing their platform. And I think there's a lesson to be learned here with all systems. Was keep the main thing the main thing, focus on that, do that really well, and then all these other things kind of fit in and come in. Um, there's there's actually a great book called The Law by Frederick Bastiat, and it essentially concludes it's kind of like this. Um, it's written to sort of promote free economics and to limit big government. And at the end of the book, he concludes by essentially saying that the economy is a lot like a child. You don't have to blink a child's eyes to make it to like get the eyes to work, or push down its chest to get it to breathe. If you just leave the child alone, it'll do all those things by itself. It just kind of naturally work itself out. And I feel like that's the same with like businesses and corporations and big enterprises. Like if you just keep the main thing the main thing, all the other
Yep.
things kind of just fall into place naturally. And I think by trying to control everything and have a hand in every pie, you actually end up pushing everyone away, and then you have stagnation. And I really hope that doesn't happen with Gamefound or with Kickstarter. I really hope that they will just learn to keep the main thing, and then allow specialists to do their thing in coming in and optimizing other areas. So that's kind of like my overall thoughts just on maybe centralization in general. But I just kind of want to leave that for people's consideration when they're thinking of the difference between centralized systems and decentralized systems, and the idea of owning your own audience or giving your audience to somebody else, but then you have all the convenience that comes with that. So there's
Yep.
a lot of different equations here to weigh up as you make your decisions moving forward. I certainly wouldn't rule out Gamefound. I think you should seriously consider it in 2025, but just know that there's a lot of loose ends here that we're trying to tie up, and just hopefully you have a bigger picture after listening to this one, as well as the episode we did last week, just so that you can maybe come to a more informed decision.
Yeah, and for those that actually made it to the end of this podcast, you're really trying to do your homework. That's what I think. And I try to be clear about my biases ahead of time, but this podcast is it's not about trying to sell our services. I mean, yeah, come buy our services or whatever, just consider us if you wanted to, if you need marketing or whatever. But the purpose of this podcast is to share what's working, what we're trying, what we're seeing in the industry, and it's meant to be a free resource for people to listen so that they can critically think and make the best choices for themselves. And we offer marketing services. We do ads, we do email marketing, we build landing pages, and we help people with pre-marketing. As we love pre-marketing for Kickstarter and Gamefound and whatnot. And we've done this, several hundred times at this point for tabletop. But the purpose is really just to educate you so that you can make the decision that is right for you. In the end, our job as a marketing team, if you were a client of ours and you were like, which one should I use, Kickstarter or Gamefound, and you were totally impressionable, our job would be not to tell you which one to use, but to give you information and arm you with information so that you can make the best choice for your company. Because in the end, like, we are a supporting agency to your company. We want to tell you how things are done so that you can go be successful. And that's one of the reasons we have courses coming out that are, we'll talk about those probably a lot more next week. But there's a lot of things to learn, a lot of things to do as a solo entrepreneur with this great idea of a game that you've got or whatever. And we want you to be as equipped as you can be, to be as successful as you can be, so that when you come back for round 2, or I mean, even in round 1, if you want to hire us, I'm cool with that. But like, when you come back in round 2, we've given you the information, and now you're too busy, and now you have more money, and you can actually hire somebody to do this for you, and then then you can hire us. But in the end, like, we want you to just be successful. And that's why we share this information. Hopefully you appreciate it. We're going to have Robot Richard send us on out.
Well, that's all the time we have for this week's episode of Crowdfunding Nerds. For more resources, articles, and to listen to past podcasts, please visit us at crowdfundingnerds.com. And if you have a crowdfunding question, we also have a page on our site where you can send a message directly to us. Please visit crowdfundingnerds.com/question. And if your question is a great question, we may include it in a future podcast. Thank you all again for listening to this week's episode, and we'll see you next week. Stay nerdy.